I have officially paid off $20,000 in 10 months. And the number one question I get every single time I talk about it is, how did I do it? How did you do it?
I'm no financial advisor. I'm not Dave Ramsey. We just did what worked for us. The very first thing we did was
I paid off $27,000 in credit card debt in 9 months. I want to preface this by saying my timeline is specific to my scenario. Your timeline will be specific to your scenario.
Check out these stories where people had like high, and I say high credit card balances, but they were able to pay them off. There are some people who talk about the methods that they use to pay it off. So I think it's really informative to see how other people are paying off their credit card debt, because I know I need some assistance. I
have officially paid off $20,000 in 10 months. And the number one question I get every single time I talk about it is, how did I do it? How did you do it? How'd you do it? How'd you do it? I'm going to tell you. Number one, I moved home. I moved back home. I am lucky enough to have parents who own their home. It's my childhood home. My childhood bedroom was still there. They welcomed me back with open arms. I know that that's not the situation for everyone, but that's my situation. I took advantage of it. I completely reallocated my rent budget to paying off my debt. So I used to pay about $1,800 in rent, utilities, fees, parking, all of that. I don't have to dig into my fund budget. I can continue to do everything else I was doing. I just had to live at home. The second thing that I did was I came up with a pay schedule. Every single time I get paid, I will pay half of all of my bills. At 7 o'clock every other Wednesday, I was paying the $1,000 to my Capital One bill. Every single time. Period. Even if it's still pending, I don't care. I want everything settled by Friday so that I can go into the weekend knowing exactly how much is in it, and I don't have to worry about anything going crazy. And that was just the easiest way for me. That's the way that my brain works. That just made the most sense for me. The next thing that I did was I got balance transfers. I will do a whole video on balance transfers actually, but basically I had zero interest for basically my whole debt payoff cycle. The next thing that I did, which is actually probably one of the most important things that I did, I created 2 emergency funds. So I always had an emergency fund, and I keep about 3 months of emergency bills in it. So that's like my baseline bills. That's rent, utilities, car payments, car insurance, period. Everything else I can figure out. But I always keep 3 months of my baseline bills in a high yield savings account. So instead of putting my money into my high yield savings account, I put it into a first line of defense fund. That's what I called it. So basically a first line of defense fund was an emergency fund. So that I didn't have to worry about touching my actual emergency fund. And I saved up about $2,000 and I left it in a savings account that was attached to my checking account so that if I needed money quickly, I could easily move it over. Anything basically that happened where I needed extra money that I did not budget for, I took it out of my first line of defense fund so that I wouldn't have to dip into my emergency fund. The 2 most important parts of this whole thing is making sure that you have a plan and you have a routine, and the first line of defense fund. Because once you start dipping into that savings account, you're fucked. It's gonna go away. I didn't have to worry about going back into debt when emergencies happened. And I didn't have to worry about taking away from the progress that I had already made in my emergency fund. Yeah, hopefully that helped. Thank you for watching. Bye.
I like that. The first line of defense fund. So the emergency of the emergency fund. So you touch that first. So you're not even touching your savings. It's an emergency fund of an emergency fund. I like that idea. And again, here we go. She had support. This is a common theme. If you can go back home and live with your parents, if you have a support system or a husband who you can rely on, or wife, do that and say, look, we have to set out this plan so that I can get out of debt, or you can get out of debt. Let's set a plan. Let's do something where we can work together. Prime example, went back home with her parents. If it's something that you can do, you might want to try it. I know it's going to be hard. You know, you lived on your own for so long to go back home and be with mom and dad just to pay. Just think about it. It's only temporary. It's not going to last forever. It's just something to get you out of debt and start fresh. Or they say start afresh.
I'm no financial advisor. I'm not Dave Ramsey. We just did what worked for us. The very first thing we did was put 20% of our income towards our debt, no matter what. Our strategy was to get all of our credit cards under 30% as fast as we could. I would take my smallest credit card, put the 20% towards that small credit card, get it under 30%. Once that card was under 30%, I moved on to my next card and got all of our credit cards under 30% first before I focused on paying everything off. I'm not a person that has to have my lashes done. I can wear strips and be completely fine. Instead of getting my nails done every 2 weeks, I got my nails done once a month. If I cannot buy it 3 times, I cannot afford it. Having this mindset changed my life. If I was in a store shopping and something cost me $100, I didn't look at it as it costing $100. I actually looked at it as it costing $300. So I would ask myself, can I buy this thing for $300? Or if I buy this thing for $300, am I going to feel it? And if I feel those $300, then I can't afford it. I didn't buy it. Everybody's journey is different when it comes to paying off your debt. Your journey may not be as quick as mine, or it might be quicker than mine, but just stay focused. Make sure you are putting that 20% towards your debt no matter what. Keep your credit cards on auto pay and make sure that you are keeping those cards under 30%. Love you. Bye.
I also like that she mentioned she pays 20% regardless of what's going on. She pays 20% of her balance. That's a good idea. And then, of course, if you're paying 20% of the balance every single month, you're going to pay it down faster. I think that's what she said, 20%. Rewind it. Correct me if I'm wrong. But paying a certain percentage every month as opposed to the minimum payment that you see on the statement will make a bigger dent in that balance as time progresses. And I believe that's how she was able to pay that debt down a lot faster. So think about it as, okay, this is the balance this month. Calculate 20%. If you can, make that payment. It's going to be higher than the minimum payment. And even if you can't do 20%, just go over the minimum as much as you can. As much as your budget allows you to do it, go over that minimum payment. It'll lessen the time that you have paying off that credit card balance. The auto pay, I'm not always a fan of it because there's some times where you can't cover it. And then you have things coming out your checking account and then you're overdrafting and then you're getting more fees. Only do auto pay when you know for sure you will have that money there. It's a great idea, but instead of doing auto pay through the company, I was advised to do auto pay through my bank. So you want to push the money out as opposed to having them pull the money from your account. So you're in control. So more in control, I should say. You can control auto pay both ways, but they say that it's better that you push the funds out as opposed to them pulling from your account. So that's just a little tip that I learned along the way from some of my financial friends. Again, I'm not a financial advisor, just want to say that. But she also talked about changing your mindset as far as what you can afford. Even though you might see a price and say, oh, it's only $60, swipe. Oh, you already at $62 once you swiped it. You might be at $63, depending on your APR and your interest rate. So just think about it as far as, can I really afford it today? Can I afford it next week? Can I afford it tomorrow? Because every single day, interest is accumulating and adding on to what you just swiped, basically.
I paid off $27,000 in credit card debt in 9 months. I want to preface this by saying my timeline is specific to my scenario. Your timeline will be specific to your scenario. You have to base it a realistic timeline on your circumstances. The main reason I was able to clear up that much debt in that short period of time is because we are a double income household, live mostly on my husband's salary. A few of my bills and my debt are being paid with only my income. That is how my husband is basically helping me get through my debt by supporting me and being the main provider. Secondly, There's no magic sauce here. The real way you're going to clear up your debt, there's only two ways. Decrease your spend and increase your income. Those are the only two ways you're going to get to your goals. Have goals that you want to pay off debt. Those are the two things you need to do. You need to increase your income or decrease your monthly spend. It started was basically Dave Ramsey steps, the baby steps. I will post the baby steps here. This debt I've been carrying with me for years. Like before I even met my husband, years. I just always had minimum payments on stuff. And I just carried it around like a pet. With the baby steps, I saved $1,000. Why? Because you need to stop using your credit card. So you need to have a buffer. You need to have that buffer there so you're not paying these payments to credit cards and then you're just racking them back up because you have no funds. And that is an emergency. So first step was basically I made $1,000 in emergency. Still have it there. Then second thing I did was stop using my credit cards. This is a hard one, but you can't be paying off your credit cards and then using them again. Like that is literally the purpose. And I know people say, well, I don't have enough money that I have to go back to using cards. Then you need to change something. It's just the reality. You need to either make more money, you need to get a side job, you need to sell stuff, or you need to slow down your payments. Are you paying too much? Are you putting too much on your debt payments? That is possible. If you're putting too much payments on your debt, causing you by the end of the week to reuse your credit cards, then you need to slow down. It's not a race. I know everyone hates Dave Ramsey, but I take some things that I want and some things that I don't, I leave. But he talks about the tortoise and the hare. The tortoise wins every time. Slow and steady. Base your payoff off of what you can afford. Don't overpay because you want to get it done quick and now you're going back into credit card debt. Lastly was just figuring out ways where I can make more income. So I would, like one time I rented my car out to a family member, I made $200. So instead of them going to Turo, they used my car. So stuff on Poshmark. I had a single stock, I sold it. I made giant payments anytime I could. Any extra money, I put it on there. I stopped doing my nails. I know my nails look good from far, but I've been practicing. I've been painting my nails. I stopped getting my nails done every month. That's already saving me $130. I just started doing that like 3 months ago. I stopped getting my eyebrows done. I just clean them up. I haven't got my hair done. I've been chopping the last haircut. First of all, she butched my, but after that, I've been chopping my stuff. Less impulsive shopping. Big one. If I see something I want, I screenshot it or I put it in my notes app and then I revisit it later. Do I still even want it? Most of the time you don't have to sacrifice. You're going to have to either sacrifice time by getting a second job, or you're going to have to sacrifice things by selling them, or you're going to have to cut things out of your budget. There is no magic pill potion recipe. Like cut costs, get more money. Stop using your credit cards. Be realistic with your budget and be realistic with what you can afford, because that is what is going to help you progress to where you want to be. And do not compare yourself to me. Do not compare. There's billions of creators here sharing their debt-free journey. Do not compare yourself. Go based on what you can do, what you can afford. Slow and steady. Slow and steady. I definitely live. I still live. I still go out to eat. But I just am so much more conscious about spending that itself has saved me. That is the recipe to paying off your debt.
Yes. Again, we mentioned sacrifice. You have to sacrifice. You have to budget. You have to not be impulsive. So many good tips that she just shared right there. Now, if you have some additional tips that you want to provide, add them to the comments. We will take all the tips. But she's another one who had help. She said she relied mainly on her husband's income. She was able to pay down her debt because he was covering the household bills. Again, it's so great to have some help. Not everybody has help. Again, don't compare your timeline with hers or anybody else's. Slow and steady wins the race. I really like that she said, don't overpay your minimum payments if you know that you can't afford it, because that's going to make you go right back to using your credit cards, because you're going to be overdrawn. You're going to be overdrawn because you're trying to overpay on something that you can't necessarily overpay at that time. If you can overpay by $2, great. Every little bit counts. Again, slow and steady wins the race, like she said. And she did this is the second time I saw somebody talk about Dave Ramsey and the snowball method. I think that was one of the first ones that somebody had mentioned. And the baby steps. Take a look at those screenshots that she provided. Screenshot it yourself. But it's always good to have an emergency fund if you can. $1,000 to start. $500 to start if that's something that you can accomplish sooner. But trying to get to $1,000, that's a good idea. So instead of using your credit cards when you do have an emergency, you have that fund, the amount already in your checking account or your savings account as an emergency fund. I like that.
You have debt, and I'm talking about student loans, credit cards, this video is for you. I started my debt journey in 2019 when I had $42,000 worth of debt. 9,000 of that was in credit cards, and 33,000 was student loan. If you're familiar with Dave Ramsey's baby steps, I did do Financial Peace University and did follow many of the baby steps to help me pay off my debt. Started with the snowball method by paying my smallest balances first and then working to my larger balance. I was making about $36,000 per year at my job and knew that I needed other sources of income to help me pay off my debt. For me, that looked like working a flexible part-time job as well as doing Uber Eats. Any money that I would get from these additional sources of income, I would put directly towards my credit card debt. From December of 2019 through November of 2020, I was able to pay off about $27,000 worth of my student loan. This is not a flex at all because during this time, I was making between $36,000 and then I transitioned to another job where I was making $57,000. I lived at home during this time and honestly, really it was about making a lot of sacrifices in order to focus on paying off my debt. I'll make another video that goes more in depth about how I did it. I hope this video serves as motivation to know that it is possible to pay off your debt, but it definitely is going to take budgeting, being serious, making sacrifices in order to get there.
It was so good for her to be able to live with somebody, her family, to help her, cover the overhead expenses of rent, mortgage. She may have been contributing to the household bills, but those big bills were out of the way so that she could pay down that debt. So that's a good thing. And then making sure that you sacrifice. You're going to have to sacrifice a lot of the things that you want, not your needs necessarily, but a lot of the things that you want in order to pay down that debt, if that's what you're focused on. So sacrificing, like she said, budgeting your money. I always say you need to write it down so you can see it. You need to write it down so you can see it, or, put it in a spreadsheet on your computer and just map out everything that you need to pay on a monthly basis. So that way you have a stricter budget on where you can spend your money on a monthly basis. I'm not a financial advisor. That's just my advice to help pay down some of that debt.
My name is Dom, and I'm a 28-year-old remote software engineer living in the Washington, D.C. metro area. Today, I'm going to share 3 tips on how I got out of debt fast as a new grad at the tender age of 22. These 3 tips directly resulted in me being able to dig myself out of $15,000 of consumer credit card debt in 6 months. I'm going to share these tips with you while I go for a walk because it is way too nice of a day here in D.C. for me to be indoors. Let me first preface these tips by saying that how quickly you can pull yourself out of debt is directly proportionate to how much debt you have and also how much income each month you can put towards paying off debt. Tip number 1 for me was to use the snowball method of debt repayment rather than the avalanche method. It's literally so pretty outside. The avalanche method is generally considered the more financially savvy way to attack debt because it has you attacking your debt with the highest interest rate first, which saves you more money in the long run. My highest interest debt happened to be my highest amount debt as well. So it took me a long time to really chip away at that debt. I ended up just getting discouraged at a certain point and I just didn't really make any progress. When I ended up switching to the snowball method, it was just really motivating and satisfying to see debts being cleared immediately. My lowest credit card debt at the time was a maxed out card that was like $500. I was able to wipe that out in 1 month. The second tip that I used was to create a budget, and a very bare bones budget, meaning that I listed all of the bills and all of the obligations that I had each month, and I really didn't budget for anything outside of that. I kind of like lowered my entertainment budget, my eating out and takeout, all those like extras. I kept that to a very bare minimum, and I put every extra penny that I had towards my debt snowball each month. My last tip would be to really get into free or cheap hobbies. The goal here is to keep yourself preoccupied because for me at least, I know that I start spending money when I'm bored. More money that I'm spending on like entertainment or going out and things like that, that's less money that I can be putting towards my debt. Preferably, you want to get into some more like budget-friendly hobbies, things like hiking. Camping can be a really good budget hobby, especially after the initial investment of camping equipment. I am a nerd, so I love playing board games and I play Dungeons and Dragons with my friends, and those are all free. Video games is another hobby that's like pretty cheap for me. I know it can be kind of expensive to pay like $60 for the new Assassin's Creed game, but for me that's a good investment because that's $60 up front, but it takes me forever to like 100% games, so that's like guaranteed entertainment for like the next 2 years. Those are my tips for how to get out of debt very quick. If you guys have any tips that helped you get out of debt, please leave them down in the comments below.
She talked about finding free hobbies, free things to do, to occupy your mind so you don't go shopping. To occupy your mind so you don't spend. That's a good idea too. Think of some other things that are fun for you to do as opposed to going to the mall, logging on to online shopping things. I'm not going to name names. But doing the spending is what's messing up the budget. So you got to take it back down. Entertain yourself. Don't be impulsive. Write that budget down. Stick to it. You can do it. I am a proponent of writing everything down so you can see it. I like to write with paper and pen. I know a lot of people like to do digital things, digital budgets, write it down so you can feel it and see it and check it off. Checking things off. Oh my gosh. There's no such satisfaction other than completing something and checking it off the list. But yeah, I like those tips that she offered as well. And I'm sure we all can relate to just buying things out of not necessity, but more out of want. Oh, I can swipe my card and I can get it. Instant gratification. That's what I'm looking for. So these balances have become a bit out of control, but they have began to take control by learning different methods, by figuring out ways to stop using those credit cards. What I do is I'll take my credit card, especially when I know I'm getting ready to go out. This is discipline. Discipline. I put them in a drawer and I close it and I walk out. Whatever I have, it has to be cash in hand, maybe my debit card, something like that. That's it. I'm not taking the credit card because I know I'm going to see something. If I go to the store, I'm going to see something. So I have even limited going out to the store. It helps. It helps keep that money in my pocket. But again, if you have some additional tips on how you pay down your debt, feel free to add them in the comments. Like you stayed out the mall. That's a tip. Don't go to the mall. I stayed home and cooked. I learned a new recipe on YouTube and I went to the grocery store and I purchased the items, not on my credit card, but with some cash or debit card. Came home and cooked. That meal would have cost however much at. I ain't even gonna name no restaurants. But yeah. Save your money. Figure out different ways to do it. You got it. As always, I appreciate you for being here. Thank you so much. Subscribe if you like, because I would like that. Take care, and I'll see you on the next video.